September 22nd, 1943, North Atlantic. Nearly 700 miles west of Ireland. A torpedo is already hunting. No lookout has seen it. No radar can detect it. No alarm will sound before it strikes. Deep beneath the black Atlantic, a slender cylinder slices silently through the freezing water. Somewhere ahead, 17 Royal Navy escorts guard 38 merchant ships, carrying the supplies Britain cannot survive without. On one destroyer, sailors scan the darkness. A signalman grips the icy rail. An engine room crewman wipes sweat from his face despite the cold. None of them knows that death is already closing the distance. What they don't know is that this torpedo isn't searching for a ship. It's listening. The Germans call it the G7s. The Allies give it a simpler name, not. Unlike every torpedo that came before it, this weapon doesn't calculate where a target will be. Hidden hydrophones listen for the loudest propeller noise in the ocean, then steer directly toward it. And that changes everything. The fast destroyers protecting Allied convoys suddenly become the easiest ships to kill. Within weeks, acoustic torpedoes have crippled escorts, sunk destroyers, and shaken the confidence of convoy commanders across the Atlantic. Every captain knows the terrifying truth. Once the torpedo locks onto your propellers, there is almost nothing you can do. No gun can shoot it down. No radar can warn you. No maneuver guarantees escape. Tonight, Convoy on 202 is sailing straight into the waiting Leuthen Wolfpack. 8 German U-boats lie beneath the waves, convinced they finally possess the weapon that can reverse the Battle of the Atlantic. But one escort is towing something unusual nearly 200 yards behind her. It isn't a secret weapon. It has no engine, no explosives, no electronics, just a crude framework of hollow steel pipes crashing together beneath the sea. Only weeks earlier, senior officers dismissed it as little more than noisy scrap. Before this night is over, the deadliest torpedo in the Atlantic will ignore a British destroyer and chase a lie instead. For nearly 4 years, the Battle of the Atlantic had been a contest of detection. Whoever found the enemy first usually survived. British radar searched the surface. Aztec sonar probed the depths. High-frequency direction finding intercepted German radio signals before U-boats could disappear beneath the waves. Together, these innovations steadily pushed Admiral Karl Nitz's submarine fleet onto the defensive. By the spring of 1943, Germany was losing U-boats faster than it could replace them. Veteran commanders were disappearing, experienced crews were becoming scarce, and what had once seemed an unstoppable campaign was beginning to collapse. Then, everything changed. The G7's acoustic torpedo didn't care where a destroyer was. It cared only about what it heard. The harder an escort accelerated to attack a submarine, the louder its propellers became, and the easier it was for the torpedo to find. In a matter of seconds, the hunter could become the hunted. Reports soon flooded the Admiralty. Destroyers were being struck even after making violent, evasive turns. Captains who had survived years of Atlantic combat suddenly found themselves facing a weapon that ignored nearly every tactic they had mastered. The Royal Navy searched desperately for answers. Engineers experimented with reducing propeller noise. Scientists analyzed, captured acoustic data, hoping to discover a weakness in the torpedo's primitive guidance system. Escort commanders changed attack patterns and delayed high-speed pursuits whenever possible. Nothing worked. The conclusion seemed unavoidable. A destroyer's engines generated thousands of horsepower. No simple mechanical device could ever produce a louder underwater signature than a warship driving through heavy seas. The mathematics appeared undeniable. If the torpedo followed the loudest sound, then the destroyer would always be the loudest object in the ocean. Most experts accepted that verdict. But one scientist looked at the same evidence and refused to ask how the ship could become quieter. Instead, he asked whether the torpedo could be persuaded to listen to something else. The man who would solve the Royal Navy's newest crisis wasn't a famous admiral. He had never commanded a destroyer through a U-boat attack. He had never stood watch on a convoy crossing the North Atlantic. He was a chemist. Charles Frederick Goodeve had built his career at University College London, studying chemistry, combustion, and industrial materials. His world revolved around experiments, evidence, and one simple rule: if the facts disagreed with accepted wisdom, trust the facts. War rewarded that kind of thinking. Soon after Britain entered World War II, Goodeve joined the Royal Naval Volunteer Reserve and was assigned to one of the Admiralty's most unusual organizations, the Department of Miscellaneous Weapons Development. Its mission wasn't to build bigger guns, it was to solve impossible problems. One of Goodeve's earliest successes came against German magnetic mines. Rather than asking how ships could avoid them, he asked why the mines worked at all. His research helped develop degaussing, a system that neutralized a ship's magnetic signature and dramatically reduced the threat. Quietly, it saved thousands of Allied vessels. Now another German invention landed on his desk: the acoustic torpedo. While naval officers debated new tactics, tighter convoy formations, and more aggressive maneuvering, Goodeve ignored the arguments. He wanted to understand how the weapon made its decisions. He spent days studying intelligence reports, technical analyses, and combat accounts from surviving escorts. A pattern soon emerged. The torpedo wasn't identifying destroyers. It wasn't recognizing silhouettes. It wasn't calculating strategy. It followed one rule and one rule only: find the loudest propeller noise, then follow it. To everyone else, that made the weapon unstoppable. To Goodeve, it revealed something entirely different. Every machine has a weakness, because every machine can only react to the information it receives. If the torpedo could be convinced that something else was louder than a destroyer, then it wouldn't be chasing the ship at all. It would be chasing a deception. It sounded almost absurd, and when Goodeve presented the idea to senior officers, many dismissed it before he had even finished explaining it. Goodeve's answer didn't rely on advanced engineering. It relied on understanding the enemy better than the enemy understood itself. By late 1943, Allied intelligence had pieced together how the German G7s operated. Hidden inside its nose were sensitive hydrophones, tuned to detect a specific range of propeller frequencies. The torpedo didn't recognize a destroyer. It didn't identify silhouettes or calculate targets. It simply turned toward the loudest sound. Nothing more, nothing less. To most naval officers, that made the weapon almost impossible to defeat. A destroyer couldn't shut down its engines in the middle of a battle, nor could it outrun a torpedo already homing on its propellers. But Goodeve saw the problem differently. The torpedo wasn't loyal to its target. It was loyal to the sound. Those were two very different things. His proposal was startlingly simple. Instead of trying to hide the destroyer's noise, why not create an even louder one? Tow a mechanical noisemaker hundreds of yards behind the ship. If it produced a stronger acoustic signature than the propellers, the torpedo would abandon the destroyer and follow the decoy instead. The first prototype looked anything but revolutionary. A framework of hollow steel pipes, short lengths of chain, heavy steel wire, a tow cable. As the destroyer moved forward, the pipes slammed violently against one another, filling the water with an intense metallic roar that carried for miles beneath the surface. The device would eventually receive the code name Foxer. Many experienced officers were unimpressed. Some openly laughed. To them, It looked like little more than scrap metal dragged behind an expensive warship. Others argued that no collection of rattling pipes could possibly outmatch thousands of horsepower driving a destroyer's propellers through the Atlantic. On paper, the criticism seemed reasonable. Several officials recommended shelving the project before valuable time and resources were wasted. For a moment, Foxer appeared destined to become another forgotten wartime experiment. But Goodeve's department possessed one advantage few others enjoyed. It could build prototypes and conduct limited sea trials without waiting for full Admiralty approval. That bureaucratic loophole gave Foxer one final chance. Off the rugged west coast of Scotland, a Royal Navy destroyer was preparing to face the only judge that mattered. An acoustic torpedo. There was only one way to end the debate. Not with calculations, not with meetings, but with a torpedo. Off the rugged west coast of Scotland, a Royal Navy destroyer steamed across a carefully prepared test range. Trailing nearly 200 yards behind her was the strangest piece of equipment ever trusted to protect a warship. There were no electronics, no secret transmitter, no revolutionary technology, only hollow steel pipes crashing together beneath the waves. Waiting below the surface, a British submarine prepared to fire practice acoustic torpedoes designed to imitate the German G7s. The first run was conducted without the decoy. The result surprised no one. Within moments, the torpedo locked onto the destroyer's propellers and closed on its target exactly as expected. The officers watching from the Escort nodded confidently. Then came the real test. The destroyer streamed Foxer. As the ship gathered speed, the steel framework came alive. Pipes slammed together with every swell, sending a violent wall of metallic noise echoing through the Atlantic. Another torpedo left the submarine. For a few endless seconds, nothing happened. Every pair of eyes remained fixed on the torpedo's wake. Then it began to drift. Slowly at first, then decisively. Not toward the destroyer, but toward the rattling pipes trailing far behind her. A second torpedo made the same choice. Then a third. Then another. Every practice weapon ignored the warship and hunted the decoy instead. The official report captured the moment with remarkable restraint. Target discrimination, 100% in favor of decoy. A single sentence. One extraordinary result. Years of accepted naval thinking had been overturned by a bundle of steel pipes. Among those studying the trial was Captain Frederick John Walker, Britain's most successful U-boat hunter. Walker trusted evidence more than opinion, and the evidence was impossible to ignore. He immediately ordered Foxer fitted to every available escort in his group. But victory came with an unexpected price. Foxer's deafening noise protected a destroyer from acoustic torpedoes, yet it also blinded the ship's own ASDIC sonar, making it far harder to detect nearby submarines. Goodeve quickly proposed a practical solution. Escort crews would tow Foxer only when an acoustic attack was likely, then recover it once the danger had passed. The compromise preserved both protection and sonar effectiveness. It was a solution arrived at just in time. Because far out in the North Atlantic, Convoy on 202 was already sailing toward 8 waiting U-boats, and this time the experiment would be conducted with real torpedoes. Nightfall, September 22, 1943, North Atlantic. A cold wind sweeps across Convoy on 202 as 38 merchant ships push westward through heavy seas. Around them, 17 escorts hold a protective screen, their crews scanning an ocean that reveals almost nothing. Somewhere beyond the darkness, the Luthen Wolfpack is waiting. 8 German U-boats lie submerged, their commanders convinced they finally possess the weapon that will restore Germany's control of the Atlantic. Months of Allied victories have pushed the U-boat force onto the defensive. But tonight they believe the balance is about to change. The plan is simple. Destroy the escorts first. Without them, the slow merchant ships will be left helpless. Then the attack begins. From deep beneath the surface, the first G7's acoustic torpedo surges from its launch tube, its hydrophones immediately searching for the loudest propeller noise in the sea. Moments later, a lookout's voice cuts through the darkness. Torpedo screws in the water. The order comes instantly. Stream Foxer. Sailors race to the stern, struggling with heavy cables as the steel framework crashes into the Atlantic. Within seconds, the hollow pipes begin hammering against one another, creating a deafening underwater roar. To the men aboard the destroyer, it sounds like chaos. To the torpedo, it sounds like its perfect target. The weapon closes rapidly. Ahead, the destroyer's propellers churn through the sea. Behind it, an even louder noise. For a heartbeat, nothing changes. Then the torpedo turns. Its white wake bends away from the warship and races toward the rattling steel pipes, trailing hundreds of yards astern. Seconds later, a violent explosion erupts far behind the Escort. The destroyer sails on untouched. Then, another torpedo comes. Again, Foxer is streamed. Again, the weapon abandons the destroyer. Again, another explosion tears harmlessly through empty water. The invention many officers had dismissed as little more than noisy scrap metal is doing exactly what Charles Goodeve predicted. But the night is not without tragedy. HMS Lagan is struck before her crew can fully deploy the Decoy. A Nat torpedo smashes into her stern, crippling the destroyer and putting her out of action. The lesson is immediate and unforgettable. Foxer could only save a ship that had time to stream it. Over the next 2 nights, the Luthen Wolfpack fires 17 acoustic torpedoes. The results shock both sides. Only one escort is successfully hit, and no ship is sunk by a Nat torpedo. Deprived of their greatest new advantage, the German submarines fail to break the convoy. Allied escorts regain the initiative, forcing the U-boats away while damaging or sinking several of them during the running battle. Within weeks, escort commanders across the Atlantic are demanding Foxer as standard equipment. By the end of 1943, the weapon Germany believed would change the Battle of the Atlantic has lost the advantage that made it so terrifying. It wasn't defeated by a larger gun. It wasn't defeated by a faster ship. It was defeated by a scientist who realized that the easiest way to fool a machine was to make it believe a lie. When the Battle of the Atlantic finally ended, there were no victory parades for Foxer. No medals were awarded to the bundle of rattling steel pipes that had quietly protected countless Allied sailors. Most men who served aboard escort ships never knew the name of the scientist who had given them one more chance to survive. They only knew that whenever the order echoed across the deck, stream Foxer, their odds of making it home had just improved. As reports from convoy after convoy reached the Admiralty, one pattern became impossible to ignore. Again and again, German G7's acoustic torpedoes abandoned destroyers and chased the artificial noise trailing behind them. The weapon that had promised to reverse Germany's fortunes in the Atlantic had been reduced to hunting decoys. The surprise was gone. German commanders searched desperately for answers. New firing tactics were tested. Launch procedures were adjusted. Engineers attempted improvements to acoustic guidance. But the fundamental weakness remained. The torpedo could only react to what it heard, and Foxer made sure it heard the wrong thing. By the end of 1943, the Decoy had become standard equipment aboard most British escort vessels. American and Canadian navies soon introduced similar acoustic decoys based on exactly the same principle: not hide from the weapon, deceive it. Charles Frederick Goodeve never became one of Britain's most celebrated wartime heroes. After the war, he returned quietly to civilian scientific research, where he continued a distinguished career far from the headlines. Yet his greatest contribution wasn't simply an invention. It was a new way of thinking. Instead of trying to overpower an intelligent weapon, he exploited the assumptions built into its design. That idea never disappeared. Modern navies still deploy sophisticated acoustic decoys against homing torpedoes. Today's systems use advanced electronics, programmable sound signatures, and computer-controlled deception, but they all rely on the same principle Goodeve recognized in 1943. A machine can only make decisions based on the information it receives. Change that information, and you change its decision. History often celebrates the biggest battles, the most powerful ships, and the commanders whose names fill history books. But sometimes, history turns because one person asks a question no one else thinks to ask. Charles Goodeve didn't build a faster destroyer. He didn't invent a deadlier torpedo. He simply discovered the fatal weakness inside Germany's most advanced naval weapon. It trusted its own ears. And on a cold September night in the North Atlantic, 2 rattling steel pipes convinced one of the deadliest weapons of World War II to chase a lie. If you enjoyed uncovering the hidden innovations that shaped World War II, there's another remarkable story waiting for you. Click the next video to discover another forgotten invention or unsung hero whose idea changed the course of the war. And if you enjoy deeply researched military history, subscribe so you never miss the next story.